Let's hope this works. Okay. Hey all, Pedantic Skeptic here. So, couple of things. I wanted to make one big video. Bandicam was being a little uncooperative with me. So, I'm gonna make a multi-part series. It's gonna be Unhinged Catholic shit. So, a little bit of background. I grew up in Connecticut, where there are a lot of Catholics. My mother was kind of a very loose, non-practicing Catholic, and then I have, some really deeply Catholic, elderly relatives, who hopefully won't be, alive for very much longer. They're really cringy and really annoying. But anyway, so I, kind of fell down a YouTube rabbit hole, as I tend to do, just given who I am, and the way my brain works. So, I was recommended a couple of, videos, by YouTube, and they were these, Catholic accounts. Today's video is going to feature two. I did try to, let's see. I tried to, do a, response to a few of, Natalie Damina's, videos, but Bandicam stopped recording, before I got to that, and I didn't notice it. But, today we have two accounts, Pints with Aquinas and Ascension Presents. There's some unhinged shit here. Biggest issues are that, Catholics tend to have these incredibly strict rules that are, I call it the Karen Church, because people who take Catholicism seriously are really uptight. They're really, really, strange, in a bad way, and a little scary. Not in an intimidating way, but more in just like a, oh boy, I'm gonna get hurt if I stay around this person kind of way. And I, should say, I've got quite a bit of religious trauma, mostly associated with this particular Christian, denomination, as well as a few other religions, but, this is going to be, a little bit looser than some of my other videos. I do want to put out a couple of warnings. There'll be a lot of talk about sexual abuse, a lot of talk about drug use, eating disorders, and other self-destructive behaviors, a lot of talk about sex, a lot of swearing, which you probably should expect from me if you've seen any of my other videos. I swear a lot. Get over it. If you have a problem with me swearing, you don't have to watch my videos. The Ascension Presents guy, I don't know if my, video cut off before I got to his swearing video. I believe it did, unfortunately. But, the Ascension Presents guy, makes a whole video on whether or not swearing is sinful. We're gonna just take a look at some of this unhinged shit that people feel okay with putting on the internet. And, I take the stance that, being religious is not necessarily something to be, like, proud of, where, especially, like, if you make it your entire identity. I, try to make a variety of things core to who I am, so, you'll hear a lot of stuff on my channel about autism. You'll hear a lot of stuff on my channel about moths and plants. Sometimes I'll talk about Phlebodium aureum for 10 minutes straight. You'll hear a lot of stuff about, science and stuff that I've done in my career, because I'm not all about one thing or another. And so, unfortunately, there were a couple of, responses that didn't get picked up by Bandicam as I was going through some of these YouTube channels. And so, the other thing is there'll be some portions of this video where the screen is frozen, but the audio seems to still be working. I think that I'm just, like, at, like, the bandwidth limit or, the storage limit, so, I generally record some videos, after I uploaded them, I delete the videos off my computer to free up space, and I just hadn't gotten around to that. I've since done that, so hopefully, you know, going forward, some of these unhinged compilations will be a little bit better. Maybe I should call it Catholic cringe, not unhinged, but there are definitely some weird things, and I hold the stance that devout Catholics are very damaged people. They have somehow been broken to the point where these sorts of things consume their lives, and I really, really need to put out there that some of this just doesn't come across as healthy. Now, for me, maybe I'll make a whole mental health video, but religion has been nothing but detrimental to my mental health, and I'm seeing a lot of like neuroticism, borderline OCD type thoughts and behaviors from some of these groups, especially the Catholics. They're so uptight about stupid things like, whether or not, they're aware of porn existing, or, not necessarily engaging in porn, but just knowing that it exists, or, whether or not they, marry somebody who is in the same demographic, marrying other Catholics, or things like, what to give up during Lent, which is like the 40 days before Easter. I don't know if all Christian denominations have Lent. So, personally, I am in the middle of being assessed for OCD. It's very possible. I do get a lot of, like, not only intrusive thoughts, but a lot of, like, right now, my washing machine has a couple of towels in it. I can't justify running the load with just 2 towels. And they're not small towels, but, the washing machine does not look full enough for me to bring myself to run it right now. Same thing with the dishwasher. I get a lot of anxieties about, like, wasting things and being inefficient, specifically. And there's, a lot of stuff that goes on in my mind about, like, if I'm not, like, maximizing, and, like, it affects my life. Like, I won't do an autoclave run at school unless it's like a stack of 8 boxes full of stuff that takes 2 like hour-long autoclave runs to do. And so I'll make up all my like plant medium over a couple days, and then I'll throw it all through the autoclave on one day. And so I do make a lot of snarky remarks throughout this video. I gotta get some jabs in there just for my sanity. But what I want people to realize is that some of this unhinged shit that these people were assuming are genuine. They're not just fucking around. Like, they actually believe, like, some of the stuff about, like, you're committing a sin if you, don't give up something for Lent, or, drinking coffee is, bad, and, all sorts of other shit. And, you need to pray to, like, a statue rather than just regular prayer. Just weird ass shit that is, like, kind of going beyond just the, minor belief in a god and, things like that. And so this is going to be the first compilation of just unhinged Catholic content that really irks me. And I do apologize in advance for some of the language that I use. This is, not my typical style, but I do get a little fired up, and there will be frank talk of sexual behaviors. There'll be frank talk of self-harm. There'll be frank talk of disordered eating, and so I do warn you, watch this at your own risk, seriously. But let's see what some of this YouTube Catholic community has for us, please.
Hello, my name is Father Gregory Pine, and
hi, I'm Alex.
I'm a Dominican friar of the province of St. Joseph, and this is Pints with Aquinas. In this episode, I thought that we could talk about whether or not to date a non-Catholic.
I only date non-Catholics.
So obviously this is a, video for specific types of people. So it presumes that you're Catholic, presumes that you're not married, and
presumes you're a romantic.
And that you want to get married, and that you're deciding what type...
You can date somebody and not end up marrying them. You don't have to date just to marry. Jesus Christ.
Person would be eligible, or what type of people you would consider for dating. So, yeah, I just think it's a question that some people ask, and I think the answer to that question kind of shapes and shifts according to where you are in your life and maybe how long you've been waiting. So, yeah, thought it was worth asking, so let's ask it. Here we go.
Now, this channel has a lot of weird, unhinged shit. This is a channel that's got about 2,000 videos. And there's some weird stuff.
All right, so this presumes that you are in some way working towards marriage.
Why? Why does every dating relationship have to go towards marriage?
Now, I thought that it would be helpful to identify like 3 categories of people for whom this might be the case. Those who are not ready for marriage, those who are ready for marriage, and those who are more than ready for marriage.
I mean, wouldn't more than ready for marriage just be a subset of ready for marriage? You know what? I'm thinking too deep into this.
Okay, so first, those who are not ready for marriage. I can think of 2 basic categories why you might not be ready for marriage.
I can think of at least 7.
1, because of age, like you're too young, or 2, because there's some obstacle that's like in the way and you need to address that obstacle before you think about getting married.
All right. So those are decent reasons. Obviously I don't think a 4-year-old's going to be thinking about marriage. Some people are aromantic and they don't necessarily have a desire to marry. And there's nothing defective about them. They just don't have the desire to get married. Some people can't afford a marriage. Some people are in cultures where marriage is arranged, and so they may not get married because it froze it with his tongue out. Anyway, I mean there are other reasons. Yeah, I mean I guess some of those fall under the obstacle thing. Yeah, most of the ones I'm thinking about are obstacles. Not having the desire to get married, I wouldn't consider an obstacle. Not being able to afford to get married is probably an obstacle.
Okay, so in this instance, I think it's a valid question to pose. Is it even worth dating at this point?
I don't think the delineation there should be whether or not you're ready for marriage. Marriage is a gigantic commitment that has a lot more implications than dating.
Obviously, in this circumstance, if you don't really have an eye towards marriage, there's a danger in dating in a way that's kind of like aimless or just potentially curious,
No, there's not. This is how people learn more about themselves.
but not really goal-oriented. Does that mean that when you date, you need to look at the other person and be like, will you be my spouse? You need to answer that in a potentially positive way every moment of.
I like how he's just like wide-eyed. He's got very big eyes.
Every day of every week of every month of this relationship. Not necessarily, but still, it's goal-oriented, so you don't just date for dating's sake. Well, maybe some people do, but I think that when we get into that habit, we just lose sight of who we are and then what we're for. So I would recommend against aimless dating. If you're in a position where you're not yet, ready for marriage, I would say don't worry. If it seems like all of your contemporaries are dating or everyone in a similar situation is dating, don't worry because you won't die. There's nothing wrong with you, and you can still gain access to many of the goods of dating.
I mean, you will die eventually. There could be something wrong with you.
Through friendship, okay? That's not to say like dating is just turbo friendship. It's a different thing, and it has an eye towards marriage, it has an eye towards family life. But still, you won't die if you don't date. A very important point in.
Are you telling me if I don't ever date again, I become immortal?
My life was my freshman year of college. My sisters encouraged me not to
I thought he was about to say he was dating his sister.
date, just to kind of change my notion as to what human interaction consists in and is for. Now, mind you, that got me pumped about becoming a Dominican, so maybe you might want to. Well, never mind. Here we go. So that'd be the first category. Not quite ready. I would say, is it worth dating? Could be aimless.
The sound appears to be a little bit off from the audio. I mean, the audio seems to be a little bit off from like the video. Like, I'm hearing his words a little bit before his mouth moves, and it's kind of bothering me.
Could be potentially tempting. Perhaps best to hold off until you're of an age or until the obstacle is addressed, so that way you're free to give yourself to the relationship with
I'm just gonna stop looking at his mouth while I'm watching this.
an eye towards its goal. Okay? Next, I would say if you're ready to date, okay, cool. I would say it's better to date a Catholic, you being Catholic. It's better to date a Catholic.
Oh boy.
Why? Well, for a variety of reasons. One, you can share in a deeper way. All right, so friendship, depending on how you understand marriage, like friendship and marriage are related, at least in some way, shape, or form. St. Thomas says that marriage is maxima amicitia, so highest friendship. And friendship goes by way of many sharings, all right? So I'm thinking of the book A Severe Mercy. Sheldon Van Auken and his wife Davy wanted to bind their lives together by 1,000 sharings. So they sought this kind of intimacy in their relationship. And I think that we're searching for a similar thing. Those who approach the sacrament of marriage are searching for a similar thing. And that when you share the faith, you're able to share on a deeper level in a more substantive way. So, cheers. Also, I mean, just the final cause of marriage, or the goal of marriage, is procreation and education of children. How exactly that?
No, actually. Marriage does not mean that you're obligated to become a parent, by any means. Marriage is a way of giving yourself to somebody because you have a strong desire to do that for that person. You have a strong enough desire to be with that person because of how you feel towards them. It's not about whether or not you're going to procreate. And I think that it's very dangerous to look at marriage as the gateway to being sexual and having kids because honestly, it's not healthy to have kids if your relationship isn't healthy and good. It's going to be harmful to you and the children. And things just get really complicated if you feel like the only way you can have children is to get married because you're going to get married to somebody who you may not be compatible with long term. And when that happens, you end up getting divorced while you have kids. And I'm not saying that every child that grows up in a broken home, if you will, has problems down the line, but it is a good way to fuck up your child getting divorced, especially if it's a nasty divorce. Um, I don't recommend it. So maybe we should have people focus more on their feelings towards each other, not focus on, you know, you can only have kids if you do this, and if you do this, you have to have kids.
Corresponds to what is sometimes also described as an end of marriage, namely the mutual support of the spouses. How that relation was worked out is a kind of ongoing conversation between different people in the church, Thomists and personalists and others besides, right? But still, obviously, the procreation and education of children is super important. And when you share the faith with your spouse, that project will be much easier to undertake because you'll have a common vision, or at least the beginning of a common vision.
You act like two people who are Catholic are going to be in complete agreement about everything, and things are going to go smoothly. Have you ever been in a room full of Catholics? That's not how this shit works. Now, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but out of the Christian denominations, it's, really the Catholics, the Mormons, the Jehovah's, and the Amish who are the, like, outstanding freakazoid groups where you just have not only the ridiculous Jesus myth, but, like, some other bullshit attached, whether it be, with the Catholics, it's, all the angels and saints and having to have, like, very particular things to make God happy and, everything that goes along with that, to, you know, the Amish with, like, rejection of modern technology and, just a bunch of other shit that comes with, these things. Jehovah's like to annoy the crap out of people, and the Mormons they think that like wearing certain types of underwear keep demons out of your private parts or some shit like that. Um, those are like the groups where I say, there is something really off here. Like people who take that, people who take Catholicism very seriously to the point where, you know, they're wearing these pure white robes in front of a microphone on a YouTube channel, or, they think that, like, the only reason to get married is to make a baby. And, all these stupid things are permitted and not permitted that are really mundane. That person is fundamentally broken. There's something inside that isn't working right. Because there are plenty of people who identify as Catholic who aren't Karens. I call the Catholic Church the Karen Church. And the reason is because when people who are not mentally well, by the way, when people who are Catholic and who have these uber strict beliefs about things, it's reminiscent of OCD. And, a lot of times OCD comes from some sort of trauma. And I think to a lesser degree, some of this fear of God with everything, all the rigidity in the Catholic Church, there's some underlying trauma there. And I don't know if, you know, that's why pedophile priests don't get, you know, apprehended as often because they need to break in the kids to be part of this ridiculousness or what. But there's something, and I sound a little unhinged here, but you know, if we scroll through the rest of this channel, let's do that. Let's do that for a second.
You could look.
Are married priests a good idea? Does God wound us? Dark history of transgenderism. Um, let's see. Why Eve was made from Adam's rib. Um, was St. Augustine Protestant? Um, did God intend for predators to exist? I mean, look at Catholic priests. Should we love everyone the same? Stop selling condoms. Um, do I have to be smart to be holy? Um, ghosts are real. Sexual revolution. I mean, like, some of this only beer for Lent. Should you spank your kids? Um, is bodybuilding safe? Shit you can give up for. I mean, some of this bullshit here. It's just like these people. They're psychologically broken. There's something that drives a person to be so intensely obsessed with not necessarily doing the right thing, doing the proper thing, the most formal thing, without, any consideration for whether or not it's going to matter in the end.
About what it means to actually raise your children. You're not just trying to beget life in them, you're trying to beget faith in them. You're trying to help them not only to be good citizens, but to be good saints. And when you share the faith, infinitely easier. So, yeah, in light of this, I would say that, you've come to a point where you're ready to date. You can stand to be a little bit picky because
I agree you should be picky. What I don't agree with necessarily is um, that the person's religious beliefs should be the first and foremost on that list. Now, I may just be, not understanding how personal somebody's religious beliefs can be for them because, you know, one, I'm not religious, and two, I'm not necessarily so personally connected to very much where, like, it would be a deal breaker for me. Um, I mean, there are things like when I talk casually to people, there are things that I'll joke about, like, oh, X, Y, and Z, that's a deal breaker. But I'm not being serious about it. I'm joking. But, you know, as far as, things that I'd be concerned about, and I'm saying this, with the full understanding that people have the right to set their own standards for dating and, kind of have their own vision for who they want to be dating. That's well within that's your prerogative, that's your right. I would never say you shouldn't have that right. But what I want you to realize is A, if you're so religious that the religion of somebody else matters to you in a dating context, you probably don't have to worry about those people who aren't that devoutly religious being into you in the first place. But secondly, um, you know, the majority of people, even if they're religious, have other things in their life that are just as important as their religion. And, even if they put God first or whatever, it's not religious ritual first, it's God first. It's, you know, a more calm belief about what it is to be Christian or whatever, rather than, you know, I have to surround myself only with people who believe the exact same things as I do. And we all vary. And I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong if you're Catholic and you only want to date other Catholics. But I don't think we should be encouraging people to only date Catholics. Okay? We want people to make the decision for themselves.
You're looking for a helpmate. You're looking for somebody who will help you go to heaven and whom you will help to go to heaven.
Now it's starting to sound like an unaliving pact cult thing.
And who will help your family, whole and entire, to go to heaven. So somebody with whom you can kind of shape an identity as a couple and a mission as a family, and ultimately, contribute to the life of the kingdom of God here on earth and unto ages of ages in heaven. So that being said, we shouldn't be more Catholic than the greatest of saints, or we shouldn't be more Catholic than the church envisions. What do I mean by that? I think it's good to be Catholic, and I think it's good to be turbo Catholic.
I don't agree. I think the more Catholic you are, the less appealing you are to be around. Because I've lived with some pretty oddball Catholic people in my day. Um, I had a Catholic roommate who thought that having candles in the house, and I'm not a candle person, but we just happened to have candles when we moved in. She thought that these candles were going to attract demons. Um, and she was mad at our the Rhode Island governor for not banning abortion or something, like just ridiculous stuff. And she also thought that Catholics, except for her, were immune to COVID or some shit. Where all her friends were Catholic, and she'd have them over, and it was 2020, and we were all worried about COVID. And she was like, "I have an immune problem, so I can't catch COVID." But she'd have people over, and she'd be like, "Well, because they're good Catholics, they're not going to have COVID." I don't even know. Um, and you also have that cultural problem of people shaming the people who only go to church on Easter and Christmas. That was a big thing in Connecticut. If you only went to church on Easter and Christmas, people would be really judgmental of you. And, there were some people who, like, wouldn't miss church for the world, and there were some people who, went to church when they could. And, it's actually, you know, really odd because some of these people would not ask you to be devoted to that degree to anything else. Um, I don't get it.
But also be cognizant of the fact that like the church permits you to marry non-Catholic people. Okay, so we
Yes, my mother married a Protestant. Um, I mean, I don't really know how religious my father is. I doubt he's really religious at all. But he was brought up Protestant. Um,
shouldn't say something like, if you date a non-Catholic, you're a bad person, or if you date a non-Catholic, you're going to hell. If you date a non-Catholic, dot dot dot, fill in whatever. So the church envisions or provides for mixed marriages, which would be a marriage between two baptized persons, one of whom is not Catholic, or what is sometimes referred to as disparity of cult, which would be marriage between a Catholic, a baptized Catholic, and then a non-baptized person. Okay, so in the first case, you don't need permission to do that. Okay, you don't need a dispensation to do that. You just need to agree to raise your children in the faith. You, as the Catholic party, need to agree for that. And the other person needs to basically be on board. The priest should assure that the other person is on board. That also is true in the case of disparity of cult. But you also need a dispensation. You need the permission of the bishop expressly granted in order for that
yeah, this is like, why? Just go to the fucking town hall and get a marriage license. Jesus fucking Christ.
marriage to go forward. So the church, it has an understanding of what hierarchy. So it's best that you marry a Catholic. It's good that you marry a baptized person, but it's less good, or it could pose an obstacle, as it were, to the marriage and to the family if you marry a non-baptized person. So the church says, let's pump the brakes. All right, ordinarily that permission is given, or that.
This is where things get dangerous. And I want to put this delicately because I don't think that everybody who's Catholic is a bad person. I think there are Catholics who are good people, or I think there are good people who happen to be Catholics, and there are bad people who happen to be Catholics. But my concern is that if the, you know, top priority in the person you're dating and potentially marrying is that they're Catholic, you might miss other stuff that is arguably more important, such as, is this person, stable? Is this person abusive or not? Is this person, you know, compatible with your personality and, your love languages and things like that? Is this person going to, you know, are you comfortable with this person? And, you know, really honestly, there's no prescribed way of being on those axes that Catholicism provides that would make me in any way secure in trusting a person. You know, the Catholic Church teaches, a number of things that are problematic to me, like forgiveness and repentance and things like that. And the problem with that is those are things that fix problems after they pop up. Whereas I would prefer to prevent problems. So, I don't want to date somebody who's going to beat the living shit out of me when they get mad. And, if the only thing, that is important here is whether or not they're a Catholic, I might miss that sort of pattern. And, you know, it's not like Catholics are the marriage and relationship experts. Um, it's not like, Catholic marriages are really the most successful type of marriage in the first place. You know, it's just weird. And, I think Catholics are a little vicious and forceful with what they require of people. Um, a lot of Catholics are taught, like whoever you get married to, you have to press that it's a marriage within a Catholic church without any consideration of what the other person might want. you know, Catholics don't care about people's comfort and feeling of safety. And, it goes beyond the life begins outside your comfort zone. It's more of a, you know, we are intrusive to you, we are obnoxious, we are antagonistic, sort of thing. Um, you know, for lack of a better term, they are a little rapey. They like to force themselves on as many people as they can in whatever way they can, because that's what the religion kind of teaches them. And it's obnoxious.
Dispensation is given, so it's not damning, but is, it's something that has to be overcome. So, yeah, I should just say that the church permits it, but it permits it with this understanding that there are processes to go through, or hurdles to be overcome. So I'd say again, for those persons who are ready, better to date a Catholic for reasons of friendship, for reasons of children, for reasons of sanctity. You can stand to be.
Um, I don't think, my top 5 friends have ever been Catholic.
A little bit picky in light of that fact, but know that the church permits, okay? So the church permits. Boom. Now, I think it gets more interesting or more exciting when we talk about those who are more than ready. What do I mean by more than ready? I mean those persons who have been on the lookout for a spouse for some time and haven't found that spouse, and maybe now are at the point of feeling downtrodden or despair filled and just don't know if they will ever get married. And so they're feeling a little bit frantic, but they don't want to be desperate in how they comport themselves, and they don't want to, branch out to non-Catholics just out of a spirit of get married yesterday rather than from a place of genuine freedom. So I'd say this: it might be time to branch out. I don't know. It will depend on you in many ways, shape, or form. And that's not just me being slippery or relativistic. It will just depend on you, because your prudence in this matter is very much shaped by time and place and pertinent circumstances. I would say branching out will not necessarily mean settling. So don't fear to branch out. That might mean widening the pool of encounters or going to venues which might not be as turbo Catholic with the hope of meeting somebody, or using a dating app when formerly that might have made you feel a little uncomfortable or strange or artificial or whatever it is. So it could be time to branch out, and that won't always mean settling, because all of these encounters are going to end kind of in a face-to-face way. You're going to be meeting this human being and going through the steps of a relationship with this human being, and ultimately determining whether or not this human being is intended for you as a spouse. So by branching out, you're not doing something wrong in se. Okay,
I would agree with that.
think that the very step of branching out makes some people nervous, but I would say maybe push back against that sensibility. What you're doing is just widening the view. You're not necessarily training your sights in a particular corner. You're just widening your view and taking more into it. People sometimes talk about evangelidating. It's only good to date a non-Catholic if you intend for that person to become Catholic. I would say perhaps it's best not to go about it in that way.
Yeah, I really get nervous when you know, all these, and I've seen it from a lot of different denominations. All these Christians have this idea that it's their job to convert people. Um, it makes me really nervous around Christians because I don't want a relationship of any sort with the person whose ultimate goal is to make me believe and think as they do. Um, I don't think it's fair to me to be, you know, required to put the investment, the mental energy into a relationship of any type with somebody when their ultimate goal is to convert me to whatever cockamamie bullshit they believe. Because I don't intend to tear anybody's religious beliefs away from them during the course of a relationship. Um, I would prefer, religion to stay out of my relationships. Um, you know, I'd rather talk to somebody about frogs and plants and, things like that. And if somebody has any sort of idea that I'm going to suddenly turn Christian for them or because of them, I don't want them around me. Because it's a disingenuous and dishonest way of approaching interacting with another person.
Not to evangelate. I think what we're talking about here is more an acknowledgement that we don't always know what Christ is doing, okay? And we might need to be open or flexible without compromising on the integrity of our faith. So we don't know what Christ is doing. He might be using us, as it were, as an occasion for this person to come into the knowledge and love of God in a more profound way and potentially to be received into the church. That might be happening. We don't know. But at the very least, we can be flexible enough, supple enough to just widen the scope, okay? So I think that from this perspective, we can affirm simply that marriage is a good thing, okay? And it's good to want to get married, and as an expression of that desire to get married, it might be a good way to proceed just simply to widen the scope. Now, that being said, marriage is not a right, okay? So it might be the case that you will not get married, which is a difficult thing to say and a difficult thing to hear, a more difficult thing to hear, far more difficult to hear. So marriage is not a right. It's not something that you're owed, by the state or by the church or by God, the source of the authority of both. So it might be the case that all of these efforts are fruitless, and so widening the scope might just be another experience of dilating your heart only to have it contract, which would be painful, okay? Which will mean, being vulnerable and potentially as a result getting wounded, which is scary, okay? But I will say this, that when you entrust yourself to the Lord with an expectation that He is good and He will prove Himself good, you will not be disappointed. And I know this to be the case in the grand scheme because we're all called to one vocation, and that vocation is heaven. And God gives us a variety of means to attain to that one vocation, namely His Christ, His church.
So then, if that's the case, why all the obnoxious, ridiculous rules within your little cult here?
His sacraments, His graces and virtues and gifts of the Holy Spirit, which are made manifest and communicable in a variety of ways, by Christian preaching, by sacramentals, by the witness and testimony of the saints, by reading the sacred scriptures, by ... okay? States of life are part of that story, and it's a way in which our approach to heaven is kind of framed for us or shaped for us, and they're awesome, but they're not necessary in the strict sense, okay? So what is necessary is God, the baptism with which He pours the divine life into our hearts, and our response to it in faith. So we set our sights on what is most necessary. We open our hearts to what might be the way in which God is going to communicate that vocation of heaven to us in the lowercase of evocation sense of state of life, but all, mindful of the fact that He does what He wills according to His good pleasure, and we are laborers in the vineyard.
You could look at it, okay, well, let's look at it from a historical perspective. Where did this come from within the medical field? Let's look at it from philosophically, from Marxism, the role there, and second wave feminism.
I like the one in Australia. These people are not good at communicating with people who have ADHD, I swear.
Let's look at it from a contemporary way of social media and what's called rapid onset gender dysphoria. Let's look at the different origins instead of saying, that's the fault of it. And so you can look at it from a medical perspective. People say, oh, it's the sexual revolution. It's 1960s. No, this was way underway before the 1960s. And when I started to trace it back, people are like, oh, it's Dr. John Money. Okay, well, where did he get his stuff from? Well, Harry Benjamin. Well, where did he get his stuff from? Well, Magnus Hirschfeld. And you start going back, there was this guy, Magnus Hirschfeld, who was in Berlin, Germany, and he ran this Institute for Sexual Science. This place was creepy. I mean, this guy was really out there. He had a museum of sexual torture devices there. The woman of the house was a man 30 years younger than him that he had sexual relations with.
As long as they're both consenting adults, there's no big deal there. It's not for me, but to reach their own.
That later committed suicide. And this is the guy that first started doing these sex reassignment surgeries in 1920. Wow. He started with castration of a male.
Oh, my.
I think by 22, he gave a double mastectomy to a woman. By 1930, he tried to give a man a false vagina. And so what ended up happening to that man is he died 14 months later after an abyss of suffering. And while all this stuff was going on, there was an American by the name of Dr. Harry Benjamin, and he heard about this Magnus Hirschfeld fellow.
Let's see. So it doesn't seem like he's forcing anybody to undergo sexual reassignment surgeries or gender conforming surgeries. It seems like he's trying to help people feel more comfortable in themselves.
And he said, I want you to come out to do a speaking tour in the United States. And so while that patient was dying of this gender reassignment surgery, this guy, Magnus Hirschfeld, was welcomed into America as like the Einstein of sex. And he started this lecture tour. Now, Harry Benjamin became interested in this whole subject by a guy named Alfred Kinsey, who introduced him to a man who identified as transsexual.
Is transgender.
So Harry Benjamin wanted the surgeries that Magnus Hirschfeld was performing over in Germany to be more accessible in America.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, I will say that if there was an issue with people trying to force children to undergo surgeries that they don't want, they don't have a serious problem. But that's not happening.
If you wanted one of these surgeries in America, you had to fly to like Casablanca to a doctor out there who would do these things. And so he said, I want to make these more accessible here. So let's start a research team here. So Dr. Harry Benjamin started this foundation that later became WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. This is now considered kind of the gold standard of the standards of care for transgender individuals today. But this guy, Harry Benjamin, is the one who started this thing. And he said, well, I need to get a research team together. And one of the guys on the research team was Dr. John Money. And so Dr. John Money was working with Harry Benjamin after Magnus Hirschfeld came and did this tour of all his like science experiments he was doing, hailed as the Einstein of sex. And then you've got Dr. John Money coming into the picture. More people are familiar with him because of the good work of Matt Walsh. Dr. John Money, just to set the table for this guy identified as a polyamorous bisexual nudist who thought that pornography could be helpful to marriage, endorsed pedophilia, and believed that many wives think that it's good when the husband has an incestuous relationship.
Let's go back a second.
Helpful to marriage, endorsed pedophilia. Dr. John Money, just to set the table.
Okay. A New Zealand sexologist, and author known for his research on sexual identity and biology of gender. I'm just trying to see where any of this, First of all, I don't think Catholics should be, complaining about anybody else being pedophiles, but, let's see here. So what are these controversies? Mhm. Yeah, some of these, things are a little messed up. Jesus. Okay. What is this? Jeez. Okay, let's see. Hmm. Yeah. So, one of the things you're gonna know about any, you know, I mean, remember, this guy, had his career in, the 40s and 50s. And, anybody who is, kind of a pioneer in a field that had for a long time been taboo is going to have these out there weird views. It's not an accurate representation of how we understand gender and sexual orientation today. Um, Now, what I will say is I don't think that some of these things he did were okay, but that doesn't discredit the current science on people being transgender and people having various sexual and romantic orientations.
For this guy identified as a polyamorous bisexual nudist who thought that pornography could be helpful to marriage.
It depends on the context of the marriage.
Endorsed pedophilia and believed that many wives think that it's
So he didn't necessarily endorse pedophilia. He didn't see pedophilia as a disease. That's not the same thing as endorsing pedophilia or encouraging people to act on sexual urges towards children.
good when the husband has an incestuous relationship with their children because it relieves her of the burden of needing to be the full sexual outlet for the male and distributes that among the children. This is Dr. John Money. This is the guy we're talking about as kind of the godfather here in the States of this transgender movement. And so he was he was not a scientist. This guy's a psychologist, and he was fascinated with
Psychology is a science, by the way. Now, the thing that I have to say here, very important. We should not be basing our opinions on something that we have a certain understanding of today, on how people who were some of the earlier kind of originators of some of these ideas thought and acted. So here's a thought experiment. Let's frame it another way. Early research into pediatric surgery and things like that involved surgeries on infants without the use of anesthetics because doctors did not think that infants could feel pain. We've come a long way since then, but does the fact that early doctors operated on babies without anesthetics mean that pediatric surgery as a field is somehow bad? Does the fact that we have tested a number of medical products on animals mean that all of the discoveries we've made from doing those experiments are bad? One of the things you have to understand is that as medicine has progressed, so have the ethics of medicine. And some of the things that, John Money, for example, ascertained weren't fully accurate and were more of a means to get people thinking and to get gears moving for, better work to be done. And we're always progressing. We are not static. And one of the things that you have to recognize is that when it comes to any kind of medicine, anything in medicine, there is going to be a history of people doing really fucked up shit early on because we either didn't know better or we didn't care better.
With cases of ambiguous genitalia at birth. And how do we raise these kids, male or female? And they realize it's a lot easier to destroy an incompletely developed penis than it is to construct one.
Yes. Now, there is some thought these days about if you have... Now, by the way, having ambiguous genitalia is not the only intersex condition that exists, but one of the things that we are learning now about intersex people is that they're not necessarily defective and they don't necessarily need to have their, parts fixed. What you have to realize is that we have come a long way in gender and sex, and, we understand that sex itself isn't binary. It's bimodal, but it's not binary.
And so they typically would take boys who have ambiguous genitalia and castrate the boys. And then he said, well, maybe we can just raise these as girls. And they started doing these different types of experiments.
He did one experiment with one person, and it turned out really badly for a number of reasons. But it's not like he's just taking random babies and assigning them a different gender or sex at birth to see what happens.
And then the perfect opportunity came across his path, which was this family, John and Janet Reimer, had a little boy. I think it was 1965. They had twins, Bruce and Brian. And then when the babies were about 8 months old, they suffered something called phimosis, which is a condition where it's very difficult for the kid to urinate. You go to the pediatric doctor and he says, oh, well, you need to give him, a circumcision and that should ease things up. So they schedule the appointment, they go in. And apparently the doctor used a circumcision tool that involved like an electric shock. So what it would do is it would cauterize the wound to keep it from bleeding too much. And apparently there's some big mishap that happened during the cauterization surgery of Bruce's circumcision, and the penis was destroyed. And the parents obviously traumatized. They canceled Brian's surgery, and then his phimosis just resolved on its own. So the whole thing was unnecessary to begin with. And
now the phimosis thing is not the fault of any kind of gender science, by the way. Just keep that in mind.
They go home just traumatized with a little 8-month-old boy with a destroyed penis. And they're like, what do we do with this poor boy? And one night they're up watching TV, and they see this Dr. John Money on a TV show just hailing the progress being made at Johns Hopkins Hospital with these new ways that, girls, are identifying as boys and being raised in this way because gender roles. And this is the first time it's ever used in like 1955. He's talking about that stuff in his research papers, that we can raise boys because these are just social constructs.
So Native American societies, as well as many ancient societies such as the Greeks and Romans, have documented people who were somehow transgender. It is known that this has been around, presumably since we've been around.
Gender, when did this word come into play?
Well, the first time we find it in the English language is in the 1400s, exclusively with grammar, that known as masculine, feminine, or neuter.
There were words in the Latin language from fucking 4000 BC that had different genders for words.
In the 15th century, it started to be used as synonymous with sex, but predominantly it was always in terms of grammar. And so that's the way it always was. In fact, there's no record of it in the medical literature before 1955.
Was there even medical literature before 1955? I mean, wait.
When Dr. John Money introduced the term gender roles. And so that's the first place it shows up anywhere on the radar. Today, it's a really problematic word, in my opinion, because it's so extraordinarily vague. I mean, we've got gender reveal parties. Okay, what are we
Please don't light things on fire when you're having a baby.
revealing? Biological sex. Okay, but it's a gender reveal party? I thought gender was your internal sense of identity. Like, the meanings can be so different when people have a conversation. It creates a lot of confusion. So it's better to speak of sex and sexual identity than gender, which can have so many different meanings. And so, but he was promoting this idea that gender isn't just distinct from sex, it can be divorced completely from it. And so he thought, this is the perfect match control. I've got a twin set. When this one, we can just castrate the kid. And he talked the parents into that just before Bruce turned 2 years old, was castrated. And he said, look, he's going to be raised a perfectly healthy woman. She won't be able to have kids. She won't be able to have kids, but we're going to put him in dresses and change the name to Brenda, and he will be attracted to males and live a happy married life, and you'll just see, it'll go great. It did not go great. I mean, they gave this little girl, boy, a jump rope, and he said, the only thing I need that for is to tie people up and whip them with it. They gave him a sewing machine, and he disassembled it to see how the thing worked. He was not interested.
Okay, that's taking apart a sewing machine to see how it worked. That's not bad or harmful at all. And growing up in grade school, the kids teased him like, you're a gorilla. Like, what are you? Because he's in a dress, but he's all guy. And he'd get in fist fights with the other kids. And I mean, the anxiety, the depression, the mother turned to infidelity and alcoholism. I mean, the whole family was imploding. While meanwhile, Dr. Money. The difference here is a child was put into a different gender than they would identify with against their will. This guy wants to now say, you know what? If somebody identifies a different way than what their sex was at birth, that's the same thing as, a botched circumcision causing a, doctor to operate on a child and try that child being raised as, a female when they were born male. That's not the same thing.
He was seeing the boys every year and molesting the kids and saying, okay, now you need to act out these sexual things and I'll take pictures because it's important that you learn your gender roles and really messed up crap. So by the time.
Yes, that was messed up. Now, again, that isn't how gender affirming care happens today. At all.
The poor boy, Bruce Reimer, Brenda, was 13 years old. He was refusing, I refuse to see that man. And on the last visit, I mean, he totally had a nervous breakdown and tried to run away because Dr. Money was trying to introduce him to a man who identified as female. And then eventually the dad broke down and told him the truth for the first time. And Bruce's first question was, what was my name? He told him his name, and then Bruce ended up changing his name to David, and in memory of David defeating this Goliath. That this won't be the end of me. Wow. And then he found out that his case was being used all over the country by Dr. John Money in these academic forums of this has been a great success, and he's just transitioning to a mother hen, and this was being hailed, and the feminists were like, hey, look at this, gender is a social construct. Women don't have to be relegated to.
So again, the difference here is this kid was being forced into something versus somebody making the decision for themselves.
Domestic duties, because these are just cultural impositions. Men and women are the same. And this was all flowing out of his pseudoscience. And it had a tragic ending. His brother died. He ended up committing suicide himself. He got married. Adopted a couple kids and took his own life. David did. But thankfully, before he passed away, he was able to become an advocate for this. He was on the Oprah Winfrey show.
How did he have a couple of kids if he didn't have a penis?
Adoption. Yeah. So it's
Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah, Oprah Winfrey had him on, and he explained this harrowing thing he went through, and how many other kids started coming out of the woodworks after that. Dr. Money did the same thing to me, And so this guy, and he said,
how How do you respond to the hiddenness of God? This argument, and I'm not going to get. You can still man it for me, but the idea being, if God exists and wants me to be saved, and I need to accept that salvation in some capacity, then I need to first at least know that He exists.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that. Now, the issue with hiddenness is that people are not only is there the issue with something not being evident, but if something is capable of interacting with the natural world, as they claim God is, there at some point should be a way to perceive it. And because there isn't, we're left to wonder if this thing could even exist.
And yet there are atheists who really would believe in Jesus Christ and God if they could.
Would they?
So I think what they're trying to get at is, would we worship God, Jesus, and everything like that? Were we to be given these sprinkles of mites in them. God damn it. That's disgusting. God damn. Would we believe if we were given sufficient evidence? Yes. Would we worship a god should we be given evidence for his existence? That's a different matter. Now, for me, it depends. If you could convince me that a god exists, and you could also convince me that worship is required in order for me to not be tortured for eternity or something like that, then yes, I would probably worship. Now, if there's a god out there that doesn't give a fuck whether or not you worship, then I'm probably not going to spend time doing that because it just isn't something I'm interested in doing.
I mean,
there's something we don't know how to. How could you can't answer that?
You can't answer that, yeah. I mean, human psychology is so complex. When an atheist tells me, if you just gave me the evidence, I'd believe, I go, uh-huh. That's not how your brain works.
So, again, belief is simply accepting something as, a fact, or accepting something to be true. Hang on a sec. Email me, goddammit. Okay.
That's not how we work as humans. This isn't the way it is. Flat earthers exist. Okay? Yeah. The evidence the earth is round is there, and there's people who don't believe it. Don't give me this nonsense that if I just gave you the evidence, you'd change your worldview.
So, are they making this video to try and alleviate themselves of the burden of proof? I'm confused. Now, my initial thought is that with flat earthers, there's a little bit more of a conspiracy out there than, God-related stuff. But let's see where he goes with this.
We know from studying the brain that when your beliefs are attacked, even little beliefs, the lizard part of your brain lights up. Flight or flight response. I've been doing an experiment for years now with a stupid issue that I've been dealing with. It's called, is Christmas pagan? There is no evidence any aspect of Christmas is pagan. There is.
What? Okay. So, Christmas is a conglomerate holiday wherein Christians have kind of hijacked it and made it about the birth of Jesus. Now, whether or not Christmas itself, like the idea of Jesus being born, is pagan, that's another matter. But, as far as cutting down the tree and setting out lights and all that other shit, that is pagan.
There's none. Every time I say, and I have every single source I need to prove that. I can prove that from here to Tuesday. Every time I bring it up, there is somebody in the comment section, no, you're wrong, this guy's a moron, doesn't know what we're talking about. I've gotten in long comment threads where I go through and I'm citing, here's what the Philo-Killian calendar says, here's what Macrobius says, here's what the earliest texts on Yule logs are, and there's no evidence Yule logs go back to paganism. I can show you the first reference to a Yule log and John Aubrey's work, okay? They still don't believe me. You know what it tells me? It doesn't matter how much evidence I give people Christmas isn't pagan, they're still going to believe it because they want.
So, I don't know if, I mean, he's not asserting that's strictly Christian either. I do wonder, some of the weird shit that we do around the Christmas season may just be like stuff we came up with, like Christmas movies. That's, a recent thing. I think they're cringe, but, a lot of people like them for whatever reason.
Want to. Now take it with something that's much more life-changing, some more fundamental, more impactful like Christianity. You really think something that's more threatening to the way people live they're gonna change just if I give them the evidence?
So, I think what you're meaning to say is that the type of evidence or the amount of evidence that's required for something life-changing like that is going to be a lot different. Now, personally, I would rather, people tell me what convinces them. Now, I don't mean like a 3-hour-long testimonial story about like getting transformed and saved and shit like that. I don't have time to sit around for 3 hours and listen to you. But if you can like tell me the most convincing thing, I can assess it.
It's not how people are.
It's like abortion. I mean, before modern sonograms, people would say it's not human, it's not a life.
It may not be a person, but it's certainly a human. The issue with abortion, again, as I've said before, is a matter of autonomy. It's a matter of somebody's right to their own body. It doesn't matter what is detracting from their ability to exercise control over their own body. It doesn't matter if it's another human or another person. They have the right to bodily autonomy. Nobody has the right to use your body without consent. It doesn't matter if that somebody is a person or a human or anything like that.
And then you would, as the science developed, you were able to show very clearly, look at its heartbeat, look at its brain, look at how it acts.
And people tell me it's a clump of cells.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
I mean, technically, we are a clump of cells. It doesn't mean we're all but a clump of cells. We have other attributes to us, but to say that we aren't at a base level a bunch of cells is ignorant of the science. Do we suddenly stop being made of cells when we reach a certain age?
Ridiculous. It doesn't matter how much evidence you show people. And this has been shown in psychology. I remember reading a study one time where they had two groups. One group, they asked, what do you prefer, home care or daycare? So group A said home care. Group B said daycare. Then they gave them each two fake studies. One study showed how good home care was, and one study showed how good daycare was. And the people in the first group that preferred home care said, they used reasoning to dismiss the daycare study. They looked for things to dismiss.
So that could be because the question was about their preference. Not, preference doesn't necessarily have to do with what is better. Now, I don't know what they were, going on as far as home care versus daycare being better than the other. Better is not, in science we don't generally use better unless we contextualize it. So, I ran a study on some mantis nymphs, for example, and sorry, I'm just checking my notebook here real quick. Okay. Oh, that reminds me. So I did an experiment with mantis nymphs on different prey, basically. And I wouldn't say Group A did better. I would say Group A had higher survival, lower mortality, more rapid development, something like that. And so, when it comes to whether you put your child in daycare or you put your child at home care for, whatever's going on, I don't have kids, so I don't know exactly how this stuff works, but the decision is not necessarily always a function of what is the better option, because what the better option is may be different among people. Some parents really want to shelter their kids, some parents can't afford daycare, things like that.
Dismiss it. Same thing in the other group. They did look for things to dismiss them. People build their worldviews. We all do it. We need to recognize this is the way we are, because the first step to realizing we have a problem is accepting it. we all want our worldviews, the beliefs we currently espouse, to be true, because the lizard part of our brain lights up, and we.
Lizard brain is not really the part that has to do with that. Lizard brain is basically, 3 questions. Can it eat me? Can I eat it? Can I fuck it? Okay, lizard brain is just the basic survival stuff. Lizard brain is, your circadian rhythm and, your heart rate and all that shit. The part of your brain that is more about your worldview is the part that is responsible for social behavior and higher cognitive function.
Go, I don't want to be wrong on something. That's what I was telling myself when I took down my Exodus documentary and had to redo it. An hour-long documentary I uploaded. I was like, I cannot be given to my lizard brain. I know this is true about myself. I know I want it to be true, and I could easily make the evidence fit, but I know I got to do what's right. And that was hard. I literally cried. So, I know what it's like, but that's the way humans are. So when you tell me, you just give me enough evidence, I'll believe. I'm like, you're a human, man. That's not the way we work. I will give you the evidence, and I will argue.
Okay, give me the evidence. Seriously.
This is true. But people will not, if people do not want Christianity to be true, they will not accept it. And I believe it was it Pascal who said it? There's enough evidence out there for anybody who's willing to say that, yes, this could be true, but it's not forced upon us.
So, my standard of evidence is that the evidence presented to me has to be empirical. So, it has to be obtained in a measurable and replicable way, and the evidence has to be basically something that you can easily display, easily show. So, like, you hearing God talking to you in your head, that's not something you can project out to people and demonstrate. You do a series of experiments. Now, I also have the belief that if God truly is a supernatural being, because we are natural beings, we don't have the ability to perceive God, unless, and if God is interacting with the natural world, we do have the ability to perceive that interaction with the natural world, but we don't have necessarily the tools, at least at the moment, to answer the God question.
It's not like in your face kind of thing.
Yeah, enough light for those.
And I think
to
that's
seek
just
it and
the
find
genius
it,
of God. It's there if you want to come to me, but it's not going to be forced
people
upon
have
you.
changed their minds over facts.
Yeah.
Things that they didn't want to be true. So you're not saying don't give people arguments.
No, give people arguments for sure. But just accept that if they're not open, they're going to find any way they can to dismiss it. And I got to accept I may be doing that the same.
Exactly. I was about to say that. It obviously cuts both ways.
It
there
does.
are Christians who might say, give me the evidence and I'll become an atheist. And you'd say exactly the same thing, presumably.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm a theistic evolutionist. And you know what happened was an atheist online said, if you were to, could you just look at this a little more objectively? The same thing earlier, a few years ago, a Christian told me to do with the Gospels. And I was like, oh, that hit me hard. And I was like, all right, I will. So I read Jerry Coyne. I read some, I'm like, you know what? I guess I'm convinced. And this is just the way it is. And Christians today still attack me for it.
So you denied evolution and then changed your mind on it. I see, yeah.
And every time I got to change my worldview, it hurts. It hurts my brain. I don't want to accept them.
So, I have a question. Does this guy, I believe this is Inspiring Philosophy, I don't know which of these two is Inspiring Philosophy. I don't know. I am not familiar with either of these fellows, but this guy who's talking about evolution. Let us suppose, because I assume the answer is yes. Is there a difference necessarily between learning a new thing and learning a different thing about something you thought you knew already? So, I learn about the existence of another species of plant, insect, and anything like that on an almost daily basis, and it doesn't shatter me at all. I'll read a paper and there'll be, some plant hopper that I've never heard of before. Or, I just read a paper last night about some erebid moth that I had never heard of before. And it was cool. And it did not shatter my worldview, even though I had been operating, at the very least, without the conceptualization that that specific moth existed. Now, maybe I wasn't outright denying the existence of this particular moth, but my worldview did not account for that particular moth up until last night when I read this article about, like ants that help caterpillars avoid predators and, mutualisms between caterpillars and ants and things like that. And, the article was a review article about, ant mutualisms between ants and Lepidoptera, and how, there's one genus of erebid moths where, the caterpillar folds itself up to kind of look like a couple of ant workers to, blend in with an ant colony or something like that. I don't remember all the details, but my worldview arguably changed, at least a little bit, and it wasn't a difficult thing for me at all. So either I'm being a little nitpicky, or this guy is, casting a wide net, painting with a really wide brush.
I'm wrong on something. The video I'm taking, I'll take it down. I just keep delaying it because I hate myself for being wrong on something. But I'm going to redo it in June, and I just hate the fact that I was wrong on something. But I mean, here's another thing I got to fix.
And yet, clearly, God's existence could be more evident.
Could be.
Isn't. And that's not a problem because...
Because the earth is round and people still don't believe it. Look, God could show up in some people's... I mean, people like Aaron Ra, Matt Dillon have said these kinds of similar things. Like, if God, people have asked, if God appeared before you, would you believe in God? And they've said things like, no, I could be hallucinating.
Yeah.
Again,
Yes. That's a perfectly reasonable answer. Now, it would be one thing if you were raised in a vacuum where nobody introduced you to the concept of God, and then you saw God. Now, could that still be hallucination? Yes. But I would be willing to consider that something did actually show itself to you for realsies if you actually, grew up in the complete absence of any kind of God concept. Okay. Now, there is this argument that there's an internal God concept, or, we have this innate knowledge of God. I don't believe that's true. But, in any case, I'm just not convinced that that's actually a thing. But in any case, what I will say is that, you have to apply Occam's razor to these sorts of things. And, hallucinations and things like that, deceit from other people are perfectly, are more reasonable answers because we know that both of those things occur. We don't yet know that God occurs.
Again, people will find excuses to believe what they want. I think, and some people will say, they'll say, no, if God did appear, I would believe. And I'm like, you might. I mean, that might be just another way for you to tell yourself these relaxing things. Could be, could not be. This could just be a way of you, trying to feel comfortable with yourself and not feel like you're, doing this.
So then what advice would you give to the person who says, if there's arguments, I do want to change my mind?
Again, arguments are not evidence.
Really, it's not, no, you wouldn't. So what?
The advice I give is this in talking to the person, accept that you won't. First of all, the first step is accepting that's just not who you are. That's not the way you think. That's not the way you are, except you have a problem. You do want all your current beliefs to be true. I want all my current beliefs to be true.
So it's not necessarily a matter of wanting your current beliefs to be true. It's, a matter of wanting to believe as many true things as possible. Like, I could be diagnosed with cancer, for example. And depending on my mood, I might not want that to be true. But, my knowledge of, the problem, the disease that I'm suffering from, wouldn't change regardless of whether or not I believed it. Now, wanting to believe as many true things as possible and as few false things as possible is what, guides us to do preventative screenings and take care of our health, hopefully, things like that. But, wanting to believe true things and not believe false things is not the same thing as wanting your beliefs to be true.
I have to fight that every day. And I hope I'm getting better. I may not be. I hope, though. So just accept, first of all, that's not the way you think. And then try very, very hard. I mean, like very hard to just study the evidence objectively. Look at the Gospels with the principle of charity. Look at the evidence for the resurrection. I recommend Mike Lacona's book and the methodology he uses on the resurrection.
Okay, so let's see. Let's see. Is this the guy? Okay. So, you know, there is going to be some bias. Let me just see. Alright, how much does this book cost? No, I don't want that. I want this. Jesus. Oh, it's a free audiobook. So I just downloaded the audio version of this. So we will maybe go through it, I guess. That's fine. Okay.
So he says, look, a theory to explain historical facts has got to have explanatory scope, explanatory power, plausibility, the least ad hoc, provide illumination. The resurrection theory has all of that. It is the least ad hoc. It is the most plausible. It explains all the facts around early Christianity with the least amount of assumptions. It also has plausibility because it has evidence from other arguments for God's existence. I mean, you may come to a...
So yeah, I'll examine that. I bet I'm going to be disappointed, but I'll keep an open mind. Let's see. Okay. Let's go here.
If you hate wearing bras, then you're going to want to listen up. 10 years ago, I gave up my regular bras and I...
This episode of Quality and Training Purposes is brought to you by Pints with Aquinas.
Welcome to OTR Customer Service. You're speaking with Jane.
Hello, Jane. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And you?
I'm doing very well indeed. My name is James, and I'll just check this call is being recorded for quality and training purposes.
Yes, it certainly is, James.
Splendid. I was in an OTR recently picking up some petrol and some other amenities.
Yes.
And you actually had some very affordable chocolate. That's come down to a positive price. So I'd like to thank you for that in the face of all the inflation. You're very welcome. But I do have one question, and I don't know if this has been passed on to you already, because my understanding is that you're the honcho down there at the OTR call centre.
Yeah, I'm not the honcho, but I'm certainly part of the team, James.
Well, it's great to be speaking to someone who's part of the team. I was wondering if the OTR petrol stations might consider not selling condoms anymore.
And I can pass on this feedback, James. Could I give an objective explanation as to why?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. What could be some objective reasons not to sell condoms be? You are trying to bolster the population growth by having people getting pregnant from unprotected sex. you want more people to be sick with STDs. I don't know.
Yes, I have a couple of reasons.
Good. I'll be sure.
I really, really hope that this guy. Now, I don't know if he's in a one-party consent state or anything like that. We'll just assume. I mean, I know Catholics do a lot of shady shit, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt. We'll be charitable. Let's assume that either they're in a one-party consent state, so they don't need this woman's permission to record, or she's okay with them recording her. Maybe it's scripted, but I really, really hope it's scripted. I really hope he's not just like calling random people at like convenience stores and other places, asking them to stop selling condoms.
Sure to note these down.
Thank you, Jane. Number one, I would say environmental damage.
I mean, one plastic condom versus a whole ass human.
Yes.
Single-use plastic.
Oh, yes, yes.
Don't want that in a turtle's nose.
Give me a break. Let's see. Should somebody get pregnant from unprotected sex? And should they carry that baby to term? Should they decide to vaccinate and not send their kid to a public school? I'm kidding. Our environmental footprint, as far as during the course of our lives, how much we muck up the earth, is a lot greater than a single little condom.
Yes.
Number two, makes sex feel worse.
He's one of those. Okay. So, if sex feels worse when you're wearing a condom, you're not doing it right. You're not having, enjoyable sex in the first place. I'm not a sex ed teacher, so I'm not going to go all into this, but there are definitely ways to deal with having to wear a condom during sex that don't take away from the enjoyment of sex.
As I said, James, this needs to be objective.
I think
we can't.
If I could,
we can't
okay.
have. Yep. No, you finish.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think we could probably find some objective studies on that. I'd be
because we all vary in how we detect sensations. I don't think that those studies would be very accurate.
very shocked if that was a subjective point of view.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, what is subjectivity and what is objectivity there?
That's a good question. So, when I think objectivity, I think it's measurable. So, what is the objective harm if I forget to water my plants? Well, I can measure the reduction in their growth rate, or I can measure mortality or something like that. Whether there's an objective, benefit to pouring water out of a plastic watering can versus a glass one or something like that, that's a different matter. But subjective has to do with, is Taylor Swift better than The Offspring? Of course not. That's subjective.
I would say, subjectively, I would say it was damaging to relationships because it caused a boundary between partners as they were committed in a loving embrace.
Well, so depending on the relationship, people may feel more safe and comfortable using a condom, actually.
I think that would be a subjective, but I think objectively it inhibits nerve endings.
Does he realize that there's lube and shit inside the condom?
And skin contact.
Sure. Yep, I can see your point.
I hope not. It's tucked away neatly within my trouser. But number 4 then, skipping over number 3 of damaging relationships, that they can stop women from getting pregnant.
You say that like it's a bad thing. Now, not everybody wants to get pregnant. Not everybody has sex with the intention of getting pregnant. We don't need any more babies being born. We have 8+ billion people on this planet. enough is enough.
During intercourse, obstructing the procreative as well as the aforementioned unitive
I mean, there's nothing procreative about a Catholic priest with an altar boy, but
element to sensual congress.
So I've noted all of these down, James. Thank you.
Jane, I really appreciate it. I don't.
It's a pleasure.
Under certain circumstances, I'm not a nut. I think some people should be allowed to sell them sometimes. I had a circumcision myself last
TMI
year, and during that point, it was recommended to me to use a condom as a sort of bandage.
Generally, they don't recommend you have sex in the first place, but that's, your business.
For sensitive areas. But I think that's a different matter entirely. So if that could be passed upstairs to the OTR team.
Sure.
Great. You've got my number. So I'm available
yes,
to call
I do,
and
indeed.
discuss this at any point.
Yep, thank you. Appreciate that. No, we pass on all feedback, James, and we appreciate all of your feedback. It certainly does help us to diversify and to keep in touch with our guests. I mean, that's what we're all about.
I really appreciate that, and I think OTR does a great job on so many things. The petrol.
Thank you.
The donuts that you've now got. The pastry. I love this thing of now heating up the pastries. You've got Subway there. So there are so many great things about OTR, and I like that you have those little fancy fridges out front. Do you know what I mean?
I know. I saw them for the first time too at Glandor. I'm very pleased.
Pretty posh stuff. But the condoms, I think, have to go, in my opinion.
Sure. No, more than happy to pass on this feedback. Absolutely. We might, I don't know what the supply chain and the category team, how they source their products, but we are constantly always trying to be innovative and of course the environment is one of our major considerations now.
Okay. So then why are they wanting people to reproduce? Humans literally have to be forced into scarcity to not fuck up the planet. The people who are abjectly poor, the poorest of the poor on the planet, are the ones who are doing the least damage to our Earth.
So no, it's really good feedback. Thank you.
So the environmental point, we feel good about that. And the unitive and procreative elements.
I'm not sure that we'd be able to put that in our advertising campaign, James, but I've certainly included it in your feedback.
Well, so long as they know.
So, if sex is solely for the purpose of reproduction, I have a few questions. First of all, sex only for reproduction. How does this guy feel about postmenopausal women having sex? How does he feel about infertile people having sex? How does he feel about people having sex with somebody who's already pregnant? Does it matter if the person knows they're already pregnant? If sex is only for reproduction, then where's that delineation between a couple who's trying to have a baby, maybe tonight's the night that, the female partner conceives, but they don't know that for another week. Have they, now violated some law or rule? How about sperm donation? Some people may have a better chance of having a kid if they just donate to a sperm bank, but there's still no guarantee,
I don't mind people using the environmentalism as a fig leaf to cover up for people having good, raw intercourse, which I think is really, for me, the thing I'm most passionate about.
I don't need to know this.
Sure.
The way that God intended.
Why did my roommate turn the hose on? It's fine. I'm not a parent of human children, but I don't think spanking is appropriate.
Sorry.
So see, this is what I thought
you're right.
we do.
Well, I guess this is a
both
question
do it.
for both of us. So,
Yeah. You go first.
I think how I've disciplined the kids has certainly changed. I think I was far too intense as a young dad and had this fear that if I wasn't really on top of our kids, that they would somehow become horrible human beings. And I often disciplined out of anger and anxiety and fear.
So my conceptualization of this is that if you are a person who can't deal with the stress of, pint-sized primates having, their own wits about things, you probably shouldn't be a parent. You aren't yet mature enough to deal with, the fact that this is another being that is at a different developmental stage than you and, has a different way of expressing themselves as well as feeling their own feelings. And if you can't handle that, you should not be a parent.
Which is, I think, what caused the anxiety and the anger. Whereas it's funny, I think we were just talking about this with Matt Bruninger, I think a lot of people have this experience where kids will say, you parented our youngest kid way differently to the oldest kid. And that is often meant to imply you've gotten lazy, but I think it also means you've gotten wiser and you've learned not to die on every hill and how to...
Agreed.
So one piece of advice I would give that I'm learning is to really try to understand where my child is emotionally and to act accordingly. So if they're not in a place to hear me correct them or to call them to apologize to a sibling or to clean something up they just broke, like if to call them to do that thing would actually send them over the edge emotionally, don't do that, because all you're doing is making them fail and then you're kind of committed to then doing something else.
I hope he's not going to suggest spanking as an alternative.
So, what about you?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of natural consequences and talking things out with them. Like I'm a big fan of there's choices we make and there are consequences. But I'm not a big fan of spanking. If you spank in your household, that's fine.
No, it's not. It encourages children that violence is the way to deal with problems, and it makes them fearful, and it causes psychological damage. Now, there's not really difference, between, gentle spanking and a severe beating, especially, people need to realize that, if you're, 150 some odd pounds and, you lay your hands on somebody who's, 30 pounds, you can try as hard as you want to be light about it. You're still going to be inflicting a lot of damage. And, there are cases where people have, broken their kids' necks, spanking them without intending to. And, I'm not just saying, let's all be alarmist, but the issue is that you don't always know your own strength, especially when you're many times larger than the child. And you're creating an unsafe dynamic where, that child isn't going to be, comfortable expressing themselves around you. And you don't want your child to be shut down emotionally. Okay, that's going to cause you more problems down the road. It may be, I'm hoping that, you're not getting some kind of satisfaction out of it. If you get any feeling of relief from physically harming another human, you probably should get some help. But it's not like just punching a punching bag or something. You're hitting another being, and unless there's a really dire situation like somebody is being strangled and you need to quickly pull someone off someone else, you really shouldn't be laying your hands on somebody as a means of expressing any kind of discontentment.
It's more easy for it to go wrong than to go right. I've seen it gone gone wrong so many times. And I have kept the wooden spoon company in business. There wouldn't be wooden spoons without me because I
Jesus Christ.
broke so many of them.
Well, when you were a kid.
When I was a kid.
Yeah, you need to make that very clear.
Sorry.
Because
I've never hit my children with a wooden spoon, but I was of the generation that's what our parents did, and it was always I was disciplined out of anger so much of the time. I almost like vowed to myself.
Here's the thing too. Sometimes kids want to make you angry, and really the best way to respond to instigating behavior is to just ignore it. If the kid is running up to you and making silly gestures and things like that, like kids often do, if you ignore it, they're going to get sick of it after a minute, and they're going to go do something else.
I wouldn't do that. I'm sure I definitely have done it. I definitely, but I don't discipline my children in a physical way. I will physically remove someone if they're throwing a fit and just bring them away. But I am more, I don't know. I try to talk to them where they're at and talk them through things. And I think that one thing that we've done very good, even from the time they were little, is.
Hang on a sec.
Is asking forgiveness when they mess up, like recognizing like you have made a mistake, you need to apologize, you need to ask for forgiveness. I'm definitely more of a error on the side of using words but modeling, and that's where I have a hard time with spanking. It's like you're gonna hit someone and tell them, how dare you hit your brother, boom, don't hit anyone ever again.
Yeah, that's the thing, because hitting people in most contexts is not really a useful way of communicating.
I'm not as convinced by that argument. Thomas Aquinas actually makes a case for why you can hit kids in the Summa. And he says because they're like brute beasts who don't have reason. And you don't reason with a cow, and you can't actually reason with a 2-year-old. So there's got to be some way of communicating this was wrong or we don't do this. But I agree with you, I think. The older I've gotten, the more I regret the times that I spanked a child. And I don't do that anymore and wouldn't want to do that.
No. I think that we're not giving children enough credit for understanding, what they should and shouldn't do. Dogs, for example, don't have high cognitive reasoning skills, but they can still understand when they've done something that displeases someone. They can understand when they've done something unsavory or bad, if you will, without having to be spanked.
But I wouldn't want to make a blanket statement that shouldn't happen. And I also don't know if I agree with the argument that to say, how dare you hit your child, I'm going to spank you. This is a very clear, there's a very big difference here.
Right. Not in the child's mind. Didn't you just say a second ago that the child can't reason?
I think. Or there could be. I mean, you could be hitting in anger. You're right.
That's fair. But in my experience, and I think it's also knowing yourself. Like if you are someone like
So if your anger is to the point where that is your go-to, I recommend therapy. Maybe some antipsychotics. Maybe a lobotomy. Okay? I don't recommend living a life where your temper can cause you to lay your hands on somebody. Okay? There are a limited number of circumstances where you should actually physically put your hands on somebody without their consent. Okay? And those generally limit to, emergencies, someone's about to fall off of a ledge or something like that, or, they're unconscious and they're in a burning building. But in, really all other circumstances, you should not lay your hands on somebody who does not give you express permission to do so. Okay? I don't know why that's a hard concept, okay? And I mean, I don't get angry to the point where I feel the need to act out anything violent. Okay? Maybe that's just me. But I recommend if you have that propensity, you should go seek some serious help.
Go from being totally fine, okay, to crazy angry.
You really don't, though.
Do I not?
No,
I really think I do.
You're pretty calm. You do get angry, but it's very rare.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think
usually when you're not eating.
I mean, I don't know about these two, but like a lot of these people are like, a lot of these, religious folks are like, you can't swear in front of kids. You can't say these certain things in front of kids. Kids can't see this on TV. But they're okay with spanking. I don't get it.
You haven't eaten in a while.
Yeah, that's fair.
You'll get angry. I'm like, whoa, Mum's
I'm
super
like,
upset.
sorry,
Nobody tell
I
her
need
that
to
she is
eat.
because she'll bite your head off. But that really, yeah,
Okay.
you don't. You don't do that, and I
Where's like the crackhead, meth head looking half bald friar guy? I thought that this was his channel.
I'm less like that than I was.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times kids, like, I think we both kind of were that problem child.
Yep.
And so I love toddlers. I love that age.
So do priests.
And even when they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, like, I just want to hug them in it, It's like, I think sometimes people think, especially like a 2, 3, 4-year-old, you're like, they did that to make me angry. Now I have to punish them. And I'm like, no, they did it because they're tired. Or they did it because they're hungry. And most of the time, they just need a cuddle and you need to redirect,
Yeah.
And you need to let them know, like, oh, that's not how we treat our friends. This is not, I don't know. So I do think you need to discipline children. We're always constantly disciplining children. But I think there's a different mentality between discipline and punishment.
Yeah. No, and I like what you just said there, too, about it can.
I mean, I think, there should be a lot more, just positive reinforcement, Growing up, there wasn't as much positive reinforcement for me as, negative, like, discouragement of things. And honestly, I think that it's more helpful to have things you've done right acknowledged and positively reinforced because, it's easy enough to get somebody to quit doing something bad. It's more difficult for somebody to, see that they've done whatever that they were supposed to do and then recognize, this was something I was supposed to be doing because it's a good thing to do.
Can go wrong so quickly. And you can say to yourself, I'm not going to discipline in anger. But
well, so here's the thing. Expressing to your child verbally that, in a calm manner that, like, hey, you did that and that made me, mad or something. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with doing that. What I think becomes a problem is when you base your punishments of your kids solely on how that action made you feel, without consideration of, like, is this really, a harmful thing for the real world? And, I remember getting punished one time for, like, bending a metal ruler. And, it was just because my mother didn't like that I bent the metal ruler. Now, in real life, in the real world, is there really anything inherently harmful about, bending a metal ruler? Probably not. It bends back. But, that's just my take.
and anyone who's not a parent may think that they'll never feel that way. But man, when you haven't slept and the house is a mess and you got kids pushing your buttons, even if they're not meaning to, you can turn into a crazy person, and that's not a good time to start hitting people.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's what it takes to turn you into that sort of person, you probably shouldn't have kids again.
You would die. The Ninevites, that's the names. The Ninevites would throw their bodies over the wall, outside into the field. So I basically, what do they call it? Wilderness, forest, not forest.
I swear to God, this guy is on crack. Okay, he just I don't know. He's got this, like, jitteriness, the, like, wide eyes, teeny tiny little pinpoint pupils. He's on crack. Definitely on crack.
Ay, caramba. Hi, my name is Father Mike Schmitz, and this is Ascension Presents. So someone recently asked me this question. They said, why is it that we as human beings, but specifically as Catholic Christians, why do we visit cemeteries? Like,
I don't know how to answer this sensitively. It depends. Some people like to fuck in cemeteries. Some people like to visit dead relatives. Some people like to dig up a quick snack.
why would you go to someone's grave? Because they said, well, they're not really there, so why would you go there? It's just their body. And
I've walked my dog through a cemetery before, and somebody wasn't happy at me for that, but it's not really against the law.
thought, oh my gosh, this is such a great question on so many levels, and actually opens up an opportunity to talk about a bunch of different things. The first,
I generally don't drink energy drinks that have this has 250 calories in it. I generally go for the lower calorie stuff, but I'm treating myself today.
first thing is, what is a human being? I mean, we've talked about this before on these videos when we talk about theology of the body, and one of the core realities is what a human being is, what a human person is a body and soul composite, right? A human being is a body, soul together. A human person is the body and soul united.
With crack.
So, you have divine persons, like the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. That's just their immaterial spirit, essentially. You have angelic persons, which also don't have bodies. But human persons, what we are as human beings, is our body and our soul together. And so, in death, what is death? Death is the separation of the body and the soul.
Gotta keep them separated.
So a person in death, without their body back, which will come at the resurrection of the dead, they're not fully them, quote unquote, them there either. Like if you were to say, well, their body, that's not really them. Like you're right. But their soul, just alone, their soul is also kind of, sort of, not, quote unquote, really them. Does that make sense?
I don't think you're really you on all this crack. That's just me.
Because what a human person is a body and soul together. You are your body, you are your soul. What you are as a human person, as a human being, is body and soul together. So in some ways you could say that their body is just as much them as their soul is. Now obviously the soul is immaterial and therefore the soul is immortal. It endures into infinity, whereas the body corrupts and decays. But there is a sense in which that body is just as much them as their soul is.
And that's why necrophilia is bad.
In a certain sense, right? So one of the reasons why we would go visit a graveyard, go visit someone's grave, is because there's this tangible connection to that person.
I don't feel that. I mean, I'm not the most sentimental person. All right, like, I used to bury, like, my dead pets, and I would put, like, a rock over their grave. Nowadays, when I still lived in the woods, I would throw them in the woods so that they could be returned to nature, like a fucking coyote or a raccoon could come around and be like, nom, and then poop out the material so that it could be reabsorbed by the forest or something,
This is where their body was laid to rest. Now, as Catholics, we also have these things called the corporal works of mercy. So the corporal works of mercy, corpus means corporal comes from corpus. Corpus refers to the body. So in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25, Jesus says things like, I was naked and you clothed me. I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty. You gave me to drink.
You're strung out on crack.
I was in prison and you visited.
You're gonna be in prison if you keep smoking crack.
Me. I was in the hospitals. Basically, there are 6 of them. And then in the Middle Ages, the church came up with and said, well, actually, another corporal works of mercy, another work of mercy one does to care for someone else's body is the burying of the dead. Essentially, the church has kind of elevated this corporal work of mercy of burying.
It almost seems like to the Catholics, you deserve more respect when you're dead than when you're alive. And I've seen this a lot.
The dead to that level of caring for someone. In fact, this isn't a new invention. It's not even new to Christianity. Even in the book of Tobit, it talks about one of Tobit's himself acts of virtue is burying the dead. In fact, it would say that when the Ninevites, he was living in Assyria at the time, he was exiled, right, from the northern kingdom of Israel. When he was outside Nineveh, the Ninevites would take the bodies of the Jews.
I mean, like, so right now, I've had my Adderall, and this is like my third energy drink, and I am not as chipper. This guy is definitely on some crack.
And just throw them into a field, throw them into the countryside. And Tobit would go and gather their bodies and lay them to rest. He would bury the dead. And it was this act of virtue. In fact, Tobit almost lost his life a couple times because it was so important to him to take care of his fellow Jews, those people who were related to him through the covenant. There's a rabbi I heard about, or a Jewish author who was quoting some rabbis who had said, like the rabbis would say that when it comes to those corporal works of mercy, not the ones Jesus mentions, but all the works of mercy that person could do to another person,
I don't need to know.
The mitzvah, the commandments, right? Out of all of them, burying the dead is the only one that you can do without anticipating any kind of repayment, right? You do it without anticipating any kind of payback because you're taking care of someone who cannot offer you anything back. That's one of the reasons why the church,
I mean, depending on your view of dead bodies, no, I'm just kidding.
I said, this is one of the corporal works of mercy. Why? Because mercy, what is mercy? Mercy is the love that we need most and we deserve least. Mercy is the kind of love that we, in so many ways, do not have the ability to pay back. In some ways, right? So the church has...
I mean, priests and their altar boys, get things back from, never mind.
Sees burying the dead as a corporal work of mercy. And so we take care of the bodies and we lay them to rest in holy ground. And that is absolutely essential. That's one of the reasons why as Catholic Christians, we do not ever, ever, ever scatter someone's ashes. Even if someone is cremated, we inter those cremains in the earth or in a sacred place. You don't put them, on your mantle, put them in a locket and wear it on your neck. No, we always...
You add them to your favorite recipes. You can do a one-to-one replacement for flour.
Take the remains of the person, whether that's their body or their cremains, right? So the remains after being cremated, and put that in holy ground, sacred ground. Why? Because it is a corporal work of mercy, because we're honoring the fact that, yes, a human being is a body and soul together. Death is the separation of body and soul. So while their soul, God willing, is in heaven, it doesn't have to be, but hopefully they chose heaven, their body is taken care of here on earth. So you might say, okay, that's great. One of the corporal works of mercies is burying the dead. We have funeral directors now.
So is crack not a sin according to Catholics?
We have funeral homes. We have other people who take care of that kind of a thing of burying the dead. What do I do? How do I exercise that corporal work of mercy? Well, great question.
Well, and it's weird because you can get in a lot of trouble if you just bury a body in any random place. I've done it before. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm
really glad you asked. Yes, we have other people typically now in our 21st century world that we bring the body of our beloved person to them, and they take care of the body. They make sure the body is prepared for...
So I have a funny story. When my mother got sick and was about to die, I was really worried about Riley, because I know that if you die, your animal might start chewing on the body. And we went to the funeral home when my mother was still alive. I think she died 2 or 3 days later, but whatever. And I was like, so what are we gonna do with the dog? Because I'm worried the dog's gonna start trying to eat her. And they were telling me, well, if Riley was a cat, she'd probably start eating the body a lot more rapidly. But apparently dogs don't eat their dead owners unless they're really fucking starving. So several weeks, if you live alone and you die with your dog, you die at home and your dog is still there and you haven't fed your dog in 2 or 3 weeks, then the dog will start chewing. But it's not like a cat that's gonna just immediately begin feasting on your remains.
For and then buried. What we can do for our part is we can visit the graves of those who have gone before us. Why would you do that? It's like that question that came to me. Why would you do that? We do it. And when we do it, we pray for them. We do it, and when we do it, we intercede on their behalf. 2 Maccabees chapter 12 says, it is a good and righteous thought to pray for the dead.
What else is there here?
So our government... A, what's the profound thing that happens to a person at baptism? And B, but if this child is just a child, if this child is just a couple months old, a couple weeks old, however old this child is, why would you baptize a baby? And that's a great question. I love it. Hi, my name is Father Mike Schmitz, and this is Ascension Presents. So last weekend, I had the opportunity to do a baptism. I don't often get to do baptisms, right?
Because you're on crack all the time?
Because I could do a lot of marriage preps and then a lot of weddings, and then they're like, see you later. And they take off, and I don't get to see them again. Well, this is this couple, Kyle and Nicole. They're amazing. They have 3 kids now. They have 4. So I got to baptize little Owen, who has an older brother, 2 older sisters. It was amazing, not only because of the baptism itself, but what was really amazing, what I was struck by was this is their 4th child. They had.
There's no way. I'm 26 and a half. Well, almost 27. I don't have the kind of energy that this presumably 45-plus-year-old dude has. I really think this guy is on crack.
Had almost as many people at this baptism as they did at their wedding. I mean, that's maybe a little bit of an exaggeration, but it wasn't just, here's mom and dad, maybe some grandparents. It was...
Sorry. I've got to stop crack. I'm going to leave this in. I don't give a fuck.
People drove from out of town to be part of this baptism.
And to get some crack.
And I thought, this is incredible because it's almost as if these parents understand what the profound thing that's about to happen to their child at baptism, because it's kind of a big deal. First,
you're going to take a baby that already has a hard time regulating its body temperature, and you're going to forcefully dunk it in a vat of filthy water when its immune system isn't properly developed yet. And then you're going to hand it back, risking dropping it, by the way. Now you're holding a slippery, wet baby. And, you could very easily drop it, or, it's going to get infections. I mean, don't these people think?
We recognize that here, little Owen, when he got baptized, one of the things that happened was Owen was made into a child of God. We'll have another video about that at some point. But Owen was made into a child of God. What I'm trying to say is baptism did something.
I don't know how people believe this crap. I really don't know how people believe this crap.
A lot of times there are some non-Catholic Christians who see baptism as merely symbolic. It's not efficacious is the word. It just is an expression of an already pre-existing faith. The interesting thing about that is that was never expressed in the Bible. In fact, the Bible talks about it like this. How about this? In John chapter 3, Jesus is talking to Nicodemus.
I have a question. Wasn't Jesus Jewish? As far as I remember, Jesus, got baptized in the Bible, which means that baptism predates Christianity, right? And, there was, the weird story about, Jesus getting baptized, and then, the dove was like, hello! And then it became, the Holy Spirit or something like that. And, all that stuff. But, was it really need to baptize Jesus in the first place? I don't know, but that happened, so it's not just the Catholics that do the baptism stuff.
And he says, unless you're born again of water and the Spirit, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. So this is pretty powerful. From the very beginning, the church saw those words of Jesus talking to Nicodemus, baptism, or unless you're born again of water and the Spirit, they saw that as baptism. Now, a couple hundred years, a long time later, people had the thought of no, maybe that means something different. Maybe that's Jesus is saying, unless you're born of water, that means natural birth. You have to be born first. And of the Spirit.
I was born via C-section.
That's some kind of spiritual kind of a thing. Then you can't enter heaven. But for centuries, millennia now, Christians have always understood that to be baptism, the necessity of baptism. In fact, in the Acts of the Apostles, it says, be baptized then for the forgiveness of your sins. That baptism is talked about as if it actually does something, right? It's efficacious. It's not merely an expression of belief. It's not merely symbolic. It is actually powerful. It does something. In fact, St. Peter, when he's writing in the New Testament, he says, baptism saves you now. So baptism saves you. The Bible, when it talks about baptism, talks about it doing something. And what it does is it saves us. It forgives our sins. It incorporates us into the family of God. It brings us into the body of Christ. It makes us God's sons and daughters. Again, as I said, another video on that. So it does something. It's efficacious. And it's also necessary.
Okay, then. Let's see. 5 things you should never say to a priest. That's an hour long to marry a Catholic. they kind of just scare the living shit out of me. But I also think that, your partner's religious belief should not be the first thing you are worried about when it comes to your compatibility.
Short answer is yeah, you can. Here's the conditions for that. So if you're Catholic, can you marry someone who's not Catholic? Yeah, you have to get married in the Catholic Church. If you don't get married in the Catholic Church, you need express permission from your bishop.
You really don't. Like, you could, in theory, go to City Hall with your partner, get a fucking marriage license. They're not going to ask stupid questions about who's Catholic, and, that's not how this shit works. I mean, like, you have to get a marriage license anyway if you get married in the church. Why, do the whole church thing if you don't want to in the first place?
To be married according to another rite outside of the Catholic Church. If you do get married in the Catholic Church, and you're the Catholic party, you're the Catholic spouse, you have to make what we call in our diocese a prenuptial declaration and promise. And that sounds intimidating. Basically, it's 3 parts. It says, I reaffirm my faith in Jesus Christ, and with God's help, I intend to continue living out that faith in the Catholic Church. So basically, I'm Catholic, I plan on being Catholic the rest of my life. Number 2 is, at the same time, I acknowledge the respect I owe to the conscience of my future partner in marriage. They don't believe what I believe, but I respect them and I honor them. Number 3 is, for my part, I will see to it that I do everything I can to have our children baptized and educated as Catholics. So, again, 3 things. I'm Catholic, plan on being Catholic. I respect the future partner, my future spouse in marriage. Third, when it comes down to kids, where I stand is I want to have them baptized and educated as Catholics. That's not taking any responsibility or authority away from your spouse.
It kind of is, actually.
It's just making it very clear that when it comes down to it, this is where I'm going to stand. This is what I want. The person is willing to sign that and go through all the marriage prep and stuff like that. It is possible.
So, here's how I would see it. 1, I don't think we should be raising our children under any religion. But if we have to, I think the person who gives birth to the child should have the final say. Because you used your body as a host for that thing for almost 10 months before, destroying your pelvis to push it out of you. That deserves a, little bit of a standing ovation, I think.
For a Catholic to marry a non-Catholic. All that's to say, this is not a sin issue, right? Sometimes there's sin issues, like that's a wrong thing to do. It's not a sin issue. But it is a wisdom issue.
Oh, jeez. Mr. Crack Priest is going to teach us about wisdom, isn't he, Jolly Chimp?
It's a really critical distinction I want to make. No, I'm going to hear this. I know maybe in the comments and everything below, people saying like, wait a second, I know a couple that he's not Catholic, she is, and they're awesome, and they're so good, and he helps her out a ton. Like, great. Or someone who's going to say, well, I know 2 people who are super Catholic, really devoted, and it did not work out. Like, I understand. So is it impossible for a
How can you understand Catholic priests aren't allowed to get married?
couple who's Catholic and not Catholic to work out? Absolutely not. Is it guaranteed that a couple who is both, they are both Catholic, that it's definitely going to work out? No, it's not, unfortunately. But this is still a wisdom issue. And I remember when it came across kind of in my life, really, really up front, my first year of priesthood, there were 2 couples. They both married in their 20 or 30 years, anniversaries. And I spoke to these 2 couples, 2 different occasions, completely unrelated to each other within a space of 2 weeks.
And I would hope the couples are unrelated to each other.
And they both said the same thing. I wasn't even like digging for it. They just volunteered their information. The one Catholic party said, yeah, I love my husband, but and I love our kids. But if I had to do it over again, I would have married someone who was Catholic. And the other person, the 2 weeks later, another couple said the exact same thing. I remember thinking both times, like, oh, this is awkward because your spouse is right there. But I noticed that their spouses were nodding. And they agreed and said, yeah, because marriage is hard enough. It's difficult enough to be married to someone that if you're not united in the most core area of your life, it makes it even more difficult. And so again, this is not a sin issue, but it is a wisdom issue. And because it's a wisdom issue, it means that moving forward in a relationship with someone who's not Catholic is going to mean you have to be wise. And one of the ways we're wise is if we know what's the end of marriage. What's the goal of marriage in the first
That depends on the marriage.
place? Well, the church offers us 2 ends of marriage, or 2 reasons marriage exists. One is for the good of the couple, the good of the spouses. The other is for the procreation and education of children. So children are born and they're raised as Catholics.
First of all, whether or not you're married doesn't have anything to do with whether or not you're capable of reproducing. Second of all, I don't know if there's just a weird culty vibe here with we Catholics want to just breed themselves.
Like that's the ends of marriage. I mean, born and raised, right? But in the Catholic context, as Catholics. So think about this: the good of the couple. Hopefully, the person you're dating, or person you're considering dating, or person you're discerning marriage with, is good for you, right? That hopefully they're generous and kind, and they're patient with you, and they help you become more generous and more kind and more patient. And maybe they're okay with you living out your faith. That's great. I'm totally okay with you going to Mass. I'm even sometimes okay going with you to Mass. Obviously, you have some boundaries when it comes to physical intimacy, and they're okay. They're totally okay with your physical boundaries. Those are all good things. Question, wisdom. Do you want someone who is just okay with you living out your faith, or do you want someone who's going to help you live out your faith? Do you want someone who's okay with you, like practicing, following after Jesus in the Catholic Church, or do you want someone who's going to help you follow Jesus?
Hang on, I think somebody's trying to pick up some orchid mantis nymphs for me, so I gotta take a break. Oh, yeah, 5 minutes.
In the Catholic Church. We know this, right? There's some days when you're like, yeah, I'm totally the strong one, and that's great, that's all I need. They're good, they're okay with it. But there's also days when you're like, oh man, I need some help. But I can't look to my partner in life for help because they're not there to help me grow. They're just okay with my growth.
Okay, so just a second. I need to. Oh my god. Catholics are insidious. They expect 100% undying, unquestioned, just tolerance of all of their bullshit. And I hate to word it like that, but they don't have the best consideration that people may think differently than they do. And this is exemplified with their inability to get out of their own heads. And I get really concerned about just how vicious they become when it comes down to, being proud of believing in everything they believe in and having their, rituals and everything like that. It's almost pathological. And they want people to not only, be okay with it, they want to be enabled. Okay. It would be like, it's like My 600-Pound Life, where the people have very, very disordered relationships with food. They eat, like 12 meals a day, 18,000 plus calories, and they expect to be waited on hand and foot by everybody around them, and they throw a temper tantrum when, they don't get, what they want. And it's not healthy. And if you want to have your silly little ideas, rituals, cult, whatever, you don't have to drag everyone else into it. Alright, I gotta pause this for this recording for now. We're back. Oh, Jesus Christ, what next? Let's keep watching this for now.
Is this person going to help you grow in your relationship with Jesus in the Catholic Church? Because otherwise, what's it going to be? I mean, honestly, think about this on the shallow end. It means, okay, we go to Sunday Mass, and maybe they're okay with it right now, but what about when you're...
So I got a question. Let's suppose I'm dating somebody or married to somebody who has a life-threatening addiction or eating disorder or something, and their expectation is for me to be complicit and to enable them. Let's suppose, I'm married to a bulimic who expects I'm going to give them, a certain amount of money to go to the buffet every day for their binge and purge session. Is that acceptable? Would I be doing a loving thing for them by enabling that unhealthy behavior? Or would it be more loving for me to say, hey, let's, figure out, your mental health so I can, so you can have a happy, healthy life with or without me, but, let's figure out a way to get you in a better place. I think that Catholicism is inherently unhealthy. I think it can be taken too far, and I think it could become a full-blown addiction like drugs or an eating disorder or any other self-harm behavior. And I think that it's not something we should be complicit with or encouraging people to do.
You're on vacation, and he or she has plans. I was going to go golfing early this morning. No, we have to go to Mass. I'm like, oh, fine. Or every time you sit there in church with them, with her, and the priest says something stupid, because priests say stuff that's stupid sometimes.
Not just sometimes.
Or the choir's off or whatever, and you're just groaning inside and just thinking, like, what are they thinking about this? You can't even enter into prayer because you're wondering what they're thinking the entire time, because they're okay with this, but they're not helping. They're not like all on board with this whole thing. Again, that doesn't mean they're bad. And again, this is massively important. And hopefully, I skipped this when I did the introduction. When it comes to Catholic marrying a non-Catholic, that's not to say a first-class Christian marrying a second-class Christian. That is not what I mean to imply in any way, shape, or form. That non-Catholic Christians, we believe, are our full brothers and sisters in the Lord. We're separated brethren, but they're just as much sons and daughters of God, just as much our brothers and sisters. So I don't mean to talk about this in this context of like being like second. It sounds like I'm saying like second class. I don't mean that in any way. I just mean there are a lot of things that unite us, but there's also things that divide us, and those things that divide us need to be addressed. Okay, back to our show. The other is the good of the children, or to procreate and educate, right? To have our children raised as Catholics. Now, we know statistically that a lot of kids leave the faith when they turn 18, 19, 20.
You say it like it's a bad thing. I think that you are being a bit myopic here. I think you have this expectation of people. And again, I think you are encouraging people to engage in self-destructive behaviors. I think Catholicism can be very self-destructive, especially if it's taken very seriously. And, it has ways of keeping people serious by saying things like, cafeteria Christians, people who show up for church only on Christmas and Easter, and, shit like that. And, it's what it has to do to maintain itself. But, I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's good for you.
Those statistics are even greater when their mom and dad aren't united in their Catholic faith. But even think practically about this. And I was thinking about, I remember talking with a young woman. She was one of our students.
I'm sure you spoke to plenty of students and maybe did more than just that.
And she was dating, I've known her and her family ever since they were kids, but...
I don't need to know. I really, really don't want to know.
she was dating a guy on campus who she was discerning marriage with, and he wasn't Catholic. And at one point, she's like, so what's the big deal anyways? And I said, okay, here's the deal. A lot of reasons, but here's one that might mean something to you. I know that you and your brothers and sisters, when you went through adolescent phase, you were not always super excited about going to Sunday Mass.
Sure, the priests were excited about them being there, but that's a different matter.
And so your mom and dad, who were devoted Catholics, had to fight with you tooth and nail every single Sunday to get you up, to get you out the door, and get you off to Mass. Now imagine if your dad didn't care, but your mom was the faithful one. Not only would she have to fight with you to get you up and out the door and off to Mass, but this whole time she'd have to fight with her husband.
This is eerily reminiscent of, like, Intervention, where, there's a drug addict and one, parent is, really pissed off about, the fact that their kid has a drug problem, and the other parent is, fake supportive, where they don't necessarily know what's best for their kid, and so they're always lending money because they think, oh, this will be the last time my child uses, blah, blah, blah. It's not a healthy dynamic. Now, let's see. How about sex and holiness? Let's see what this is all about.
These bins have to be the most disgusting thing in the modern kitchen, and yet we all put up with it. So our government...
Not spoiler, heads up. This is going to be a PG-13 video.
Yeah, I love PG-13.
Maybe PG-15. I'm not sure. You be the judge. But we're going to talk about sex. So...
Yes, because that's what Catholics are always thinking about.
Whatever that means for you and your family, just fair warning, here we go.
How to get holy through good sex. Jesus Christ. A celibate man is going to tell us about sex, guys.
Hi, my name is Father Mike Schmitz, and this is...
And you're on crack again.
So we have the 7 sacraments, right? 7 sacraments, right?
We have the 7 deadly sins, the 7 everything's in sevens with you people. Jesus Christ.
We have those 7 sacraments are 3 sacraments of initiation, baptism, confirmation, Holy Eucharist, the 2 sacraments of vocation, and the 2 sacraments of healing, anointing of the sick, and confession. Okay, campers, what is a sacrament? I ask this of my marriage prep couples every time I meet with them, not every time I meet with them, but at least once in the course of our meeting. And I've had maybe 5 couples be able to answer that question with a definition that is adequate. And I understand. I'm putting them on the spot in this moment where they're not expecting a pop quiz from the priest in the middle of their marriage prep of, hey, what is the definition of a sacrament? But I'll ask you, what's the definition of a sacrament? There are some
I don't fucking know.
Really good definitions out there. One helpful, I think, definition is very simple.
I think this guy should rename his YouTube channel to Cracked Up Catholic. That would be great. That would be really funny. Like, I'm going to pretend to be Catholic, and I'm going to pretend to be on crack. And I'm going to do that, okay?
It's a sacred sign instituted by Christ that gives grace. A sacred sign instituted by Christ that gives grace. Okay, so what's grace? Grace is the very life of God, right? So it's sanctifying grace. It's what makes us like God. It makes us holy. It brings us in a relation with God. It brings us closer to God. Sanctifying grace is the grace that transforms.
Now, I try to be serious, and I try to be, I try to be less, snarky and less, like, ha-has, inappropriate humor, insulting thing. But, like, I just can't take this stuff seriously enough to really give it, like, my, like, oh, yeah, this is a problem because of, I gotta get some digs in there. I just, it's for my sanity.
Without it, we're done, right? We're dead. With it, we become like him. With it, we become holy. We become saints, essentially. Okay, so that's what a sacrament is. Sacred sign instituted by Christ that gives grace. When it comes to marriage, it's really interesting because I will always tell our couples this.
I also wonder if there's just something weird about, like, his video recorder or something where, like, these twitches are just, like, different frames or something rather than him, like, actually being, like, I mean, I think he's on crack, but I could be wrong.
This first part, that when you're at the altar, some people will say things like, oh, Father Mike, you married my sister. I'm like, no, I promise you I'd never married your sister. I'm unmarried. I did not marry anybody. Like, you know what I mean? You did the wedding. I'm like, yes, that's very different. Your sister married your brother-in-law, and your
I do like the pedantry here.
Brother-in-law married your sister. The Catholic theology when it comes to matrimony is that the groom gives the sacrament to the bride, and the bride gives the sacrament to the groom. In fact, the two...
That is, I can see why he's saying this is PG-13.
Two ministers of the sacrament are the bride and the groom. So I don't know if you knew that. The priest is there, a deacon is there, the bishop is there to bear witness to that. And
why isn't God doing that already? Like, what's the point of the fucking priest being there? Jesus Christ, these people are such whack-a-noodles.
To essentially officiate, to be the official witness of the church, to receive their vows, essentially. When the groom says, "I, Jack, take you, Jill, to be my wife," etc., and the bride says, "I, Jill, take you, Jack, to be my husband," etc. With those words and the power of the Holy Spirit, the sacrament is ratified. Like at the altar, the sacrament is ratified. What I mean by that is it's made real. It's a true and real sacrament. But that's not where it ends, because it's ratified at the altar, but the sacrament is not completed.
I think this is nonsense. I'm just like, I can't stop laughing.
Until the sexual embrace.
Oh, Jesus, yeah. Here we go.
I'm going to stop here for a second. So, when you have a couple at the altar, "I, Jack, take you, Jill."
One sec. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, yeah, maybe we'll watch this lady next. Alright, I need to open a new fucking... Oh, Jesus. What the fuck? Okay, let's see. Oh, I missed Taki. Then I'm always missing Taki. I'm really... Let's see,
All my life, I've been good, do what my mom and dad and God say I should. Go to church and Bible school to live by God's rule. So what?
Wait, so, they can't, like, I'm just being stupid here, but, if these are two blondes, they're not going to produce a brunette child.
Whatever people tell me that the Bible tells me I will do. Walk the halls of high school with my purity ring. Unlike those other girls, I got my morals in check. It was easy to do till I got a boyfriend. And pardon my French, but he's cute as heck. But I made a pact to keep my hymen intact, and Jesus and I are tight.
Okay, sex doesn't necessarily destroy the hymen. It's not like a covering over the vaginal opening that gets pierced, you know, but that's a different matter.
Never learned about the birds and bees. I was taught to keep an aspirin in between my knees, cause the Bible says premarital sex is wrong. But Jason says that guys can't wait that long. I don't want to lose him to someone who'll do him. I need to figure something out. Well, there's a loophole in the scripture that works really well, so I can get him off without going to hell.
I like how they're teaching this to small children.
Oh, it's my Hail Mary full of grace.
And then we follow something else after this.
In Jesus' name we go to fifth base. Oh, thank you for making me holy. And thank you for giving me holes to choose from. And since I'm not a godless whore, they'll have to come in the back door. Therefore, fuck me in the ass, cause I love Jesus.
Yeah. I wonder how the Catholics feel about that. Given their, relationship with children.
"I, Jill, take you, Jack." Ring on the finger, okay? That sacrament is real. The two have become one.
Not yet.
But the sacrament is incomplete until the sexual embrace.
But, like, so, like, I don't want to get too graphic here, but fuck it, I'm going to. Is it, like, at the initial penetration, or does, like, there have to be, like, ejaculation? Like, at what point is that embrace completed? Like, if the guy has like a premature ejaculation problem versus a delayed ejaculation problem, is there going to be like a difference? Like, I need answers to these things.
When with their bodies, they say what they said with their words at the altar. In fact, the sacrament remains incomplete. I think you could even say it remains invalid until that moment of the sexual embrace.
And does that have to be like a penis in a vagina, or can it be, any part in any other part?
Embrace. And what that means is an essential part.
Like, what if the two have okay, I don't recommend this, but one of those double-sided dildos, and they each take one half of it in each other's butt.
Essential element of the sacrament of matrimony is the sexual embrace. So when I was in 10th grade or 9th grade, whenever I went through the sacrament course in religious ed, and I was like, oh, this is so boring. I can't believe here we are talking about the saints. I had no idea that an essential part of one of those sacraments was sex. And I think maybe I might have been a little more interested if I had known this. What's the ramifications about this? Well, what the ramifications are incredible.
Not really. It's just sex, dude. Jesus.
What do I mean? Well,
does this mean he's married to a bunch of altar boys?
I remember when my parents had their 25th wedding anniversary. The priest came over to the house and they celebrated mass in the house. They renewed.
I hope this isn't going where I think it's going.
That was beautiful. When my parents a few years ago had their 50th wedding anniversary, I was the priest that got to celebrate the mass and then receive their renewal.
I don't want to hear about you receiving
of vows. It was beautiful, incredible. But did you realize? And so renewing vows, awesome, super good, well done, gold star, keep it up.
Is he wearing a wedding ring? I thought priests weren't supposed to be married.
But did you realize that every time husband and wife enter into the sexual embrace, they
I really want to know what the sexual embrace is.
Are renewing their wedding vows. That's what's happening. Because at the altar they say, I am totally yours. I'm freely, fully, faithfully, and fruitfully yours.
Does this mean I'm married to my right hand?
In the sexual embrace, that's what they're saying again. And they're not simply saying it with words, they're re-participating in.
Okay, let's, what should we go to next? What? Some of this shit is really strange. Here, let's, go here first. I'm gonna open this in a new tab.
This is the only tool you need if you're on the road a lot. This new military flashlight is...
Jesus Christ.
Hi, my name is Father Mike Schmitz, and this is Ascension Presents. So recently I've been talking with a lot of couples who seem to have kind of some similar issues, right, in their relationship. And sometimes the issue that a lot of couples have in their relationship is they want to be pure, right? In their relationship, they want to really truly love each other, not use each other physically. Yet they find themselves doing what they don't want to do, right? They find themselves getting into trouble, falling with each other essentially. And so a lot of times they'll either contact me or we'll meet here and
then have a three-way.
Say, what do we do? Because we feel so powerless in this. Should we break up? Are we supposed to
Real quick. Some people can have a relationship where there's really not sex. Some people can't. Both are equally valid. And, having a conversation with the potential partner about what your sex expectations are before you enter the relationship is probably a good idea.
What are you supposed to do? And I got a couple things to say about that. Number one, it's fantastic and phenomenal and really great that you're both united in wanting to love each other, not use each other. Well done. Number two, do we need to break up? Not necessarily. I mean, if the rest of your relationship...
This guy's probably wearing, it looks like he's wearing a really baggy, he's probably, so high on crack all the time he forgets to eat.
Relationship is really healthy.
Wait. Okay. Look behind him. It looks like there's a picture of something on fire. Doesn't it look like there's a black picture frame directly behind his head, and then it's next to a small brown picture, and then next to that, it looks like there's a picture of something that's on fucking fire.
You're good for each other, you help each other out, you can lead each other closer to the Lord.
Oh yeah, you can help each other out in a lot of ways.
Except in this one area, then it's this one area that needs to change, maybe not the whole relationship, right? So give yourself a little breathing room here, but something needs to change. I'll talk to couples say, we've been praying and we've been, we go to
Is that the only thing they're doing on their knees?
confession, we fall, and like, nothing we do helps. This is where I come in.
I don't need to know. I don't want to know that. Let's see. Oh, let's see what this is all about.
These bins have to be the most disgusting thing in the modern kitchen, and yet we all put up with it. So our government...
Your long-term boyfriend or long-term girlfriend or fiance or spouse, this is the kind of thing that they actually ought to know because it actually affects them. My name is Father Mike Schmitz, and this is Ascension Presents.
Cracked up Catholic.
So recently I've gotten a number of emails or people contacting me, maybe even some in-person conversations with couples, basically. And one of the questions that has come up, or one of the issues that has come up, I'll just give you a description. Here's Jack and here's Jill. Jack and Jill have been dating for X amount of time. We'll say like a year, 2 years, somewhere in there. And when they first started dating, they said, we really want to be honest with each other about a lot of things, about everything, right? And so what about... we'll say it delicately or indelicately. I'm not sure. We'll just say it. Where are you at with pornography and masturbation?
They're both very fun. As long as it's, ethical and, you're not, like, doing it, like, someone else's office or something.
Where are you at with impure images and impure actions alone?
The fuck is an impure image?
Right? And they had that conversation, and Jack or Jill says, "Oh, not a problem. No big. That's not part of my life." Then they keep dating for say a year and a half, and then at one point, Jack or Jill says to the other person, "Okay, I have to confess something to you. This is a part of
I play with myself.
my life. Now, whether it's a small part of my life, an occasional part of my life, or like a bigger part of my life, that's up for debate." But here's Jack or Jill, then here's this news, and it's like, wait a second, what do I do with this? Because there's two issues. One,
I can't wait to hear this one.
One is because you weren't honest with me originally, and I've been kind of entering into this relationship and growing with you, maybe under some false pretenses. What do you do?
So, like, I've actually dated people who couldn't get off with another person. Like, I have no problems getting off with someone, but I've dated people and I've been intimate with people who had to be, on their own using, their own facilities, their own faculties, if we will, to, get themselves satisfied. And it is what it is. I'm not bothered by that.
Do with that. The second thing is, what do we do now? Because this is a part of your life. I don't know, how do I know that I can not just trust you to be honest with me, but trust you in this particular area? So,
sometimes there's something to be said about just sitting there watching somebody else pleasure themselves. It's just a nice thing to do, if you want to do it. There doesn't have to be contact between the two of you. It could be just watching one another. That's a form of intimacy that people engage in, and that's for you, that's for you.
I see two issues right here, right? The two issues are, up to this point, have you been lying to me? Is that something I can get past? Does that kind of chips away at trust?
I think my biggest problem with anything sexual is I forget to clean my sex toys.
The other is, can I trust that you are growing? Can I trust that you're...
Oh, there'll be some growing.
You're doing something about this and not bringing this into our relationship. The difficulty comes from the fact that in our country, I think the average age of anybody, maybe boy or girl, doesn't matter, that they see pornography is roughly 7 years of age.
I would hope not. That would be a slight problem. I don't know what he's defining as pornography strictly.
Or 8 years of age. So it starts so young, and because why? Because pornography in our culture, in our country, has the 3 A's. It is available, it is affordable, it's typically free, and it's anonymous. And so we have this problem, and that problem is that it's everywhere around us. Every one of us has been affected by this. It also has this other issue that is, it's a bit embarrassing, or that impure actions with oneself are particularly embarrassing, or
I'm not going to go into all the details of my sex life, but I'm not per se embarrassed about it. tell me you have religious trauma without telling me you have religious trauma. So yeah, that's part one of Unhinged Catholic content. I hope to, oh crap, what just went on? My TV, oh that was weird, my TV turned itself off. Whatever, I don't give a fuck. I will, be making more of these. I'll probably, also do, like, Mormon, Jehovah's Witness, maybe Muslim, I don't know. I, do want to just, reiterate, I don't necessarily hate any particular group of people. I feel bad for some of these people who have this incredible, like, they're so caught up in this particular, like, way of thinking and acting that, like, they actually, like, don't see it as a problem. And, I don't want to sound like too much of a militant ass about things, but, when I, compare, like, religion to eating disorders, I do think that, one, they have a lot of parallels. They warp your view of the world. They make you do, weird rituals very often. They can kill you if they get severe enough and they go unchecked. And they really are not healthy. Not healthy ways of thinking. So I've been pedantic and lightly romantic and many thousands of miles from the Atlantic. I hope to see y'all in the next one.